Welcome, everybody, to Wisdom in the Best Books and Films. I am super excited this week to have Faith Moore on with me. And if you are listening on audio this week, we actually have a video. So go to Substack and check it out on video, or it might even also be on YouTube. I know that the audio gets posted on YouTube, so maybe I'll figure out how to get the video on there too. I want to introduce Faith Moore. She has written 2 books, a nonfiction book called Saving Cinderella, discussing the symbolism and wisdom in Disney princess movies, and a novel called Christmas Carol with a K, a modern retelling of the Dickens classic. We'll talk about the Saving Cinderella one today, and next week the episode will be on Christmas Carol. She also hosts a wonderful podcast called Storytime for Grown-Ups, where she reads classic novels and adds in notes that help the listeners understand. She has written articles in many well-known journals, such as the Wall Street Journal, the Federalist, and several others. She is also a freelance editor for novels of all genres. And my favorite thing about Faith Moore is that she prioritizes her family first. She is a mother of 2 and chooses to be a stay-at-home mom as her most important calling. And I can testify that she does indeed make that a priority. We have been communicating for a couple months via email because during the summer she chose to spend her time with her kids, which I think is just awesome. Somehow, on top of all of that, she finds ways to answer people like me when we come to her with questions. And I am so grateful to have her on the show today. Welcome, Faith.
Thank you. Gosh, that was a wonderful introduction. I love coming on these shows because people introduce me in all these wonderful ways. And I think like, oh, wow, I sound really cool. So thank you for having me. And that's very sweet of you to say. I do. Yes, I wear many hats, but mom is the main one. So thank you for saying so.
Well, I really think you are a wonderful person and you deserve all the praise in the world. So thank you for being here.
It is my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So I want to start by talking a little bit about Saving Cinderella. So this podcast, we are looking for, I say, bite-sized nuggets of truth that can help us to be better people. And I loved reading Saving Cinderella. I loved seeing the symbolism in there and learning about some of these things, which I felt like they made sense instinctively and intuitively. I kind of felt like, yeah, I know that. I learned that from the movie. I just couldn't have actually told you what I learned. And there's a famous quote that has been kind of modified by Albert Einstein over the years, but the quote isn't his actual quote. The one that we know is, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. The actual quote is, I think, he was talking to Louis de Broglie, and he said basically that all physical theories should be able to be explained to the level that a child could understand them. Pretty similar. But I thought, as I was reading Saving Cinderella, basically, that I don't understand these things well enough to explain them simply. But I think that a well-written story, a fairy tale, or something that has these deeper meanings, is so well done that it actually somehow enters into your soul, and that's why it kind of makes sense intuitively to us. So I wanted to ask you, how can we learn to not just have that in our soul, but also learn to have the ability to tell people about it when we see it or discuss it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for those who haven't read, Saving Cinderella is a book where I talk about the Disney princesses and from the Disney princess movies, and I explain why they actually are really great role models for girls, because these days people tend to talk about them as really anti-feminist, and I think that's not true. So I wrote this book in, I think, 2018, so a lifetime ago for my children anyway. I wrote this book going through each of the movies and trying to explain what these stories mean. As you say, what is the underlying meaning here and why is it important? And I think your question is an interesting one, because I think that actually what you're describing about how you feel about the books and the movies, that you watch them or you read the fairy tales and you intuit something in the sense that you know that these are important stories and they matter, I actually think that's the most important thing. I think what I do, what people like me do, where we kind of analyze or we talk about the symbolism or whatever it is, that's cool. It can be cool. It can also be really boring, but it can be cool to do, and it makes people go, "Oh, yeah, that's great. That's so neat. I'd never thought of that before," right? But a story isn't any good if all of that stuff is right there, kind of hitting you in the face. If a story is trying to tell you all of the things that it wants to quote unquote say, then that's not a story. That's an article, right?
Yeah.
Or a book, a nonfiction book or something. So you absolutely wouldn't want, for example, a Disney movie to kind of hit you over the head with its themes of femininity or chivalry or growing up or any of the things that we might pull out from these movies. And so if you watch them and all you get is this sense of like, that was great, or wow, you're a little girl and you're like, I really want to be like Cinderella, or I really want to be Snow White or whoever, that's good. And I think people feel, the reason I'm saying this, and I will answer your question, but the reason that I'm saying this is that I think that people feel like they're dumb or like they're missing something, or there's something wrong with them when people like me go on and on about the symbolism of this or the meaning of that. They think like, wait, where was all of that? Why didn't I see that when I was reading or when I was watching? And I think the answer is that's fine. The most important thing about a story is that you enjoy it and that it speaks to you in some way and it resonates with you in some way. So that's the first thing.
Yeah, I've actually, sorry, I
Yeah, go
actually
ahead.
just want to chip in. One of the things I've told people is that my favorite stories do have a deep philosophy or an understand like underlying meaning, but it doesn't hit you over the head. It's something that is so well ingrained in the story that it just, like I said earlier, I think it kind of enters your soul and makes you have these thoughts naturally. And I just those are my favorite stories. Is when it
Yeah. Right. I
yeah.
think I think that's absolutely right. You definitely don't. And I think also as someone who very humbly has written some fiction, and certainly I'm not at all up there with the classic writers of the age, but I know that the best themes and kind of ideas come naturally. You don't sit down to write a story about something. You sit down to write a story. And as you're going along, you suddenly realize, like, oh, I'm writing about, people who feel lonely. I'm writing about loneliness, or I'm writing about femininity or whatever it is. You don't, if you sit down to write a story about that, your story is probably going to feel kind of clunky and it's not going to feel realistic and it's not going to enter your soul in that way that these other stories do. So I think that when we are sitting there and pulling out these themes or trying to analyze these books or movies, we are not necessarily getting to some secret meaning that the author put there and expected you to find. It's not like a code, right? It's not like the author put this secret code in there that he or she knew was there and then covered it up with this story. And if you can't uncover it again, then you're not reading it correctly. That's not it at all. It's just that great stories are infused with the themes and values of the person that is writing them. So the way that you can try to sort of figure that out is by reading and watching these movies and also kind of understanding, like, for example, the Disney movies are all, the good ones are all fairy tales, the princess ones are all fairy tales. And so in order to understand them, you need to understand fairy tales. In order to understand fairy tales, you need to read some fairy tales. You can also read what people have written about fairy tales and decide if you think that's true or not. But the other thing is, you, whoever you are, and whoever is listening to this, you are just as qualified as I am to interpret literature and movies. You are also just as qualified as any literature professor to interpret books and movies. And the way to do it is, if you're reading along and something kind of strikes you and you're kind of like, hey, that's a little bit like something else. Or these two stories, I mean, a great one is these two stories have similar things, and fairy tales are great for this because they all have similar things. It's like these two stories have similar things. Huh, this other story has that same thing. What might be going on in that story that that thing represents, or that that thing is talking to us about? And the most important thing that you can do is stick to the text. So if you come up with some theory and you can support it with the text, it's probably in there. Because, like I'm saying, it's not one thing. It's not like the author was like, oh, I've secretly hidden this information about manliness in the book, and if you find it, then you get a prize. It's not that. It's just when you are reading, the things that speak to you are probably speaking to you because they speak to some sort of universal thing. And so if you're interested and you want to do this, and I always say you don't have to. You do not have to go any further than, wow, I loved that book. It made me cry at the end or whatever. But if you want to go further, then just look at the things that are hitting you in whatever way and see what comes up. That's it. It's not, there isn't a secret formula for it, I don't think. And I also think it's not, we sit in our literature classes and our professors kind of drone at us about all of these hidden meanings and things, and we feel so dumb. But in reality, that turns these books into homework assignments, and they're not. Or these movies into homework assignments, and they're not. They're stories. So I just think, experience them as stories, walk around in them, live in them, get to know these characters, and eventually you will kind of see what things feel important to you. And what feels important to you might feel important, not feel important to me, or vice versa, and that's okay too.
Yeah, one of the things I really love about your podcast is that you do approach these stories like stories. And I think a lot of, like, as a kid, when I had assignments to read books, I don't know if I've ever liked a book I was assigned to read.
No, how could you? It's a setup. It's a
Right,
total setup. It's like, please do this math worksheet, please write this essay, and please read this book. That is supposed to be like a story that you're supposed to get immersed in. Oh, and also please read it for 30 minutes, right? Like, please set a timer. So now it's like it's an assignment. Of course, you're not going to like it, right?
right.
So, I hate that. I hate that books become assignments when you read them at school.
Yeah. And you mentioned the universal truths that are in these. One of the things I really love about Saving Cinderella, and that just completely took me from left field, but that I loved, was that you mentioned in the chapter about Cinderella, and I'm not going to do big spoilers for the book, everybody go buy it and read it. But in the chapter, you mentioned symbolism in Cinderella the movie, the 1950 one, the great one, 50 something,
Mhm.
that you tie it to the atonement of Jesus Christ. And I was like, this is awesome. Because I actually think that in my opinion, in my Christian worldview, God is the source of all truth, and a lot of these things are universal and true because they actually can be related to Christ or the gospel or something. And hearing it in your book was like just a really neat thing for me to be able to see this particular connection. I loved all the symbolism and stuff you talked about, but tying Cinderella to the atonement was, to me, a neat thing. And so I think one of my favorite things about this is you can learn, if you have the foundation in truth, in my opinion, in like Christianity or the Bible or whatever, if you have a good foundation, I think a lot of these things that we can learn will be there to you, to the point where you talked about fairy tales in your podcast this whole summer, and there were weird things in there, sure, but every time you would read something, I would just love it. And there wasn't enough weirdness to make me be like, oh, that's weird. Every time I was like, there's some cool stuff in there that I can pull out, right? That I can learn about, like the gospel or life, or I think those things are the same thing. But is that, I guess I'm rambling a little bit, but do you, I feel like that foundation is important, basically, in getting, if we have a good foundation in seeking truth and in truth in our lives, that a lot of these things that might bother us otherwise won't, because the deeper meaning will be there even if we can't say it.
Yeah, no, the deeper meaning is there regardless of what, I said before, like you might find one thing and I might find another thing. That doesn't mean that we get to just interpret these things however we want. Like if I'm a member, which I'm not, but if I'm a member of some sort of cult that thinks that, we've all come down from Mars, a million years ago and we're actually Martians, and then I read like Jane Eyre and I say, yeah, see, it's all about Martians. Right? Like, that's not actually in there, right? You can't do that. And people do that kind of thing. I mean, not to that level, but they come at it
Yeah.
they come at these things with their philosophies. And maybe they're even good philosophies, but they're not in the book, right? You have
Yeah.
to, this is what I was saying before about like, you have to look and see if it's in the book. So, but as you say, the things that are in these stories are the things that are universal, the things that speak to all of us. And the Bible is a really good place to go to find the things that speak to all of us. I mean, even if you're not a Christian, or, even if you don't kind of live in a Christian world, these things are universal to human experience if you kind of take away the specifics, right? Like you may not believe that, Jesus Christ is our Lord and Savior, for example, but all of the things that he's saying about how to live your life and what makes people happy and what makes people sad and all of these different things, like those things are still universally true, I think. And
Yeah.
so that's why, it's great because so at the moment that we are recording this, although perhaps not when you're actually releasing this, we are doing Frankenstein on the podcast, and people keep writing to me to be like, it's like this part in the Bible, it's like that part in the Bible. They're quoting Bible passages. I mean, they're just coming in like fast and furious. And the reason is not that Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein in order to line up specifically with all of these various Bible passages. The point is that the Bible speaks to us about life, and Frankenstein is speaking to us about life. And so there's all of these connections, right? So I think the reason that classics are classics is, and this can be a classic movie, like, a Disney movie from the 50s, or it can be a classic novel. But the reason that classics are classics is because they hold inside of them something that will always be true for humans. So like, yeah, like these people are living in, like, take a classic novel, right? These people are living in a different time than us, doing things that feel really strange to us. Like they're going to balls and they're, riding in carriages and they're doing all this stuff that to us, we maybe have never done that before, right? But they have stood the test of time because the things that the people in the balls and in the carriages are thinking about and talking about and worrying about and yearning for are the same things that we are talking about and thinking about and yearning for. So I think that's what you're looking for when you're thinking about these books, and it's what you're responding to when you're like, yeah, that was great. And these fairy tales, I mean, they're so old. They're from like thousands of years old for some of them. And yet they're speaking to things that are still true. Like we still have to grow up. We still have to form romantic attachments. We still have to have children, all of these things that have always been true and hopefully will always be true as long as there are people. These are the things that matter. And so when you're responding to something that ultimately feels like you shouldn't be, like, wow, this is so different, and these people are not like me at all, but I'm still responding to it, I still care, it's probably because there's some universal thing underneath that is relevant to everybody.
Yeah, so that is a great transition. I actually wanted to ask you about how we can get into classic novels with a few specific things. I love a lot of classic novels. There's others that I find more difficult, but I think that I do understand that if it's lasted this long, it has to have something, and same with old movies, right? I'm a huge fan of old movies. My favorite
Yeah.
actor is Jimmy Stewart.
Yeah.
um, but with both of those, people can have a hard time, I feel like, getting into them, and I do with certain ones. It depends on which one. And I wanted to ask you a few things about getting into them, or whether we should push through the ones that are hard to get into for us or whatever. For example, you talked about all the balls and all the things. Like, do I need to be a historian expert on the French Revolution to read the Count of Monte Cristo? Do I need to like know what in the heck Miss or what is the Michaelmas? Do
Michaelmas,
I need
yeah.
to know what that is, or
Yeah.
like
Uh-huh.
to read Jane Austen, or like things like that. Do I need to, how can people avoid getting bogged down in some of those side details that show up because the time was different?
Yeah, that is a great question. And I would say that, like, sort of generally, the answer to that is no, you don't need to know those things. And and you need to understand that it's okay that you don't know them. I think one thing that happens when we read classic books, because they have been assigned to us so often in school, it feels like we're supposed to understand every single thing. And actually, that's not how we read books. Like if you pick up a novel that is a modern novel that is very easy to read, right? Let's say it's your favorite author, it's their new book, it just came out, and you know that you're going to enjoy it and understand it, right? When you pick that book up and you start reading it, you are going to have questions that you're supposed to have, right? Like you're thinking like, oh, who is this person? You know, this person just came onto the scene. Who is that? But you trust like, oh, I'm going to find out in a minute. I'm just going to keep reading. Or, you know, they're describing something that they're doing, but it's not clear what it is. And you're like, I know that in a little while it's going to become clear, right? That's how we read books. But we don't do that when we read the classics because we're afraid that we're supposed to understand the things that we don't yet understand. And so we start reading, and yeah, it says like, you know, he's rented this house until next Michaelmas, and you're like, I don't know what Michaelmas is. Oh no, put the book down. I can't handle this. They're talking about Michaelmas, right? And then you've sort of cheated yourself of the wonderful experience of reading Pride and Prejudice. So I think that one thing that we all need to do is sort of cultivate a sense of allowing the language to just flow over you for a while. So if you pick up a book and it looks like something you might enjoy, so you've read the back and you know it's Pride and Prejudice and it tells you it's a love story, it's a kind of old-fashioned sort of rom-com kind of thing, and you know it's enemies to lovers and all of this stuff, and you love that kind of thing, let's say, and so you open it up, but oh no, I don't know what Michaelmas is. You just read it and let the language kind of flow over you for a while and see. I mean, this might not happen, and that's kind of the podcast is for this, but it's like this might not happen, but you might discover that even though you don't know what Michaelmas is, you understand that this mom is kind of naggy, that these girls are kind of wanting to get married, that this man is coming to town. You know, you pick up on some details that might be important, and then you're kind of in it. And then the things that don't make sense, and that's fine. And then the things that do. And the other thing is that like you can always look things up after the fact. Like you definitely, I don't think at all that you're going to be like, oh, I'm about to read, you know, the Scarlet Pimpernel, and it takes place during, you know, the guillotines that, you know, the guillotinings that were going on in France. Like I have to read all about that first. No.
Yeah.
The book will kind of explain that to you because it's part of the plot, you know, so it will tell you. And then if you're kind of halfway through and you're like, okay, I'm figuring out what's going on in the plot, but I would kind of like to know why these people kept killing all these other people. You can just like Wikipedia it. Like, you know, you can just sort of Google like what's going on with the French Revolution or you know, whatever it is. And then you'll know. So yeah, I do not think that you need to know all the stuff that maybe like a professor would tell you had to know or something beforehand.
And right, I mean, you mentioned Pride and Prejudice right on those lines. The first time I read it, I did not pick up anywhere near the amount of things that I picked up when you read it on your podcast. Like and some of those things just weren't that important. Other things maybe were, but weren't important for me at the time anyway. And I enjoyed it the first time. I enjoyed it the second time. I think it's okay to enjoy books multiple times in different ways.
I completely agree. Yes.
Yeah. So another thing I have with some classic novels is when people find themselves disliking the main characters, what can we do to see why others enjoy it so much? And I'll give you an example. The Three Musketeers, I can see the bones of a good story in there. I've read the whole thing in French, and I love the language. I think that Alexandre Dumas is an amazing writer. The Count of Monte Cristo is one of my favorite books ever. But the Three Musketeers, I just thought every single one of the Musketeers and D'Artagnan were terrible people. And like they were kind of lecherous and they were like selfish and like I just was like, I don't know why I'm supposed to like these guys.
Mhm.
So what or in My Fair Lady, Audrey Hepburn goes back and ends up with Henry Higgins after he treats her like crap the whole movie,
Right.
and I'm
That's
like,
right.
why
Yeah.
why do I why am I supposed to like these stories?
Right. Hmm.
So how do we, I guess, get over our dislike of characters, or should we? Should we just be like, that one's a bust for me, no thanks?
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Yes. So, yeah, I have two things to say about this. One is that you are allowed to not like things that other people like. Just because books are classics doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you if you don't like them. We are each individual people with different tastes. So, again, back to modern novels, right? Like I might like rom-coms and you might like thrillers. I mean, I don't know, whatever who we are, but we just saying you might like thrillers
sure.
and I might like rom-coms. So if you say to me, oh my gosh, this whatever, the Da Vinci Code is so good, you have to read it. And I read it and I'm like, this was boring. There was no love story in it or whatever, or the love story was really wooden fake. Like, I'm not wrong and you're not wrong. The book just speaks to you and it doesn't speak to me or whatever it is, right? So that can be true with classics, even though the modern novels, they might be terrible. They might be like they might objectively be terrible,
Yeah.
but and that's like that's fine. So that's a separate issue, right? But we have tastes, and it doesn't change when we go back to read books that are classics. We still have tastes. So if you don't like rom-coms, you're probably not going to like Pride and Prejudice. I mean, you might because it's a little deeper than a rom-com, but like you have preferences and you're allowed to have preferences. So the fact that some book is kind of universally loved doesn't mean that you have to love it. I think if you're struggling with it and you don't understand it, that's another thing. I can help with that. But if you've read it and you got it and everything that everybody says about it, you saw there, but you just didn't like it, it didn't speak to you, that's fine. I feel that way about tons of classics. I feel that way about lots and lots of these books that people are always gushing about, and I sort of read them or even start them and put them down because I'm sort of like, this one's not for me. So that's fine and allowed. I think people think it's not allowed because, these are the classics and we learn them in school. No, it is allowed to not like certain books. But if it's a book where you're like, I can see that this is a good story and I can see that people like these characters and I want to like them, but I don't. I mean, you can just be like, well, I don't. Fine. That's fine. I like other books. That's okay. But I also think that if you want to figure out either why you don't like it or even like why you don't like it, like you can figure out, can I like it? But you could also figure out, why don't I like it? And then when you're like, oh, this is the reason, then maybe you can kind of let it go, right? And so I think if you look at what it is that people love about a character and then you read the book with that in mind, you can come to appreciate things that you didn't appreciate before. I mean, back to Pride and Prejudice, I have had that experience. The first time or the first couple of times I read Pride and Prejudice, I was thinking like, I like it. It's funny. I'm enjoying it, but I don't get this love story. I don't understand why people are swooning over Darcy and Elizabeth. I I don't I don't get it. I don't like him very much. I don't know what she's kind of annoying. Like I don't understand this. I'm much more of a Jane Eyre and Rochester kind of person. And that is still true. But when I read it during the podcast, I felt like, well, people love this love story. I do not want to upset that. I need to figure out what it is and just kind of get into that for myself. And when I did that, I did figure it out. It's not like I then felt just as swoony as everybody else. I didn't, but I got it because I was reading it specifically to do that. So I think you can do that. If you've got a book and you kind of like it, you enjoy it, but people love it, you can kind of be like, well, what do they love about it? And then reread it to see, can you see that? Is it in there?
Yeah.
And and of course, like great characters are flawed. So I mean, it's like, the Three Musketeers are kind of lecherous and selfish and annoying, and that may be true. But if people love them, maybe there's additional parts of them that they love, and they're willing to look past, The thing is, like, in a novel, you're allowed to look past things that you wouldn't look
Yeah.
past in a human, right? Like I love the Phantom of the Opera, but he's also a murderer. So if in real
Yeah.
life, like I met him, I would need to call the police, but in a book or in the musical, I can kind of be like, yeah, I think he's the good guy, you know? So that's also allowed.
Yeah. That's so interesting. You Jane Eyre, I had never read until you did it on the podcast,
Mhm.
and I enjoyed it quite a lot. My wife kind of pushed me away from it. She said, I want you to tell me, why do people like Mr. Rochester? Because she's like kind of gets that Henry Higgins feel where he kind of treats Jane Eyre like crap the whole time. And
Oh gosh. Okay.
that's
Yeah.
what she felt. I listened to your book, so I have thoughts, but I'd like to hear yours.
Okay. So, yes, Mr. Rochester is a controversial figure. And as I said all the way through when we were reading it on the show, if you get to the end of the book and you still don't love him, then okay. Right? Like that's fine. You're allowed I'm allowed to feel that Darcy is not swoon worthy. You're allowed to feel that Mr. Rochester is kind of rude. Like that's fine. But I think the thing about Mr. Rochester and all of the characters that are based on him or even kind of before him, like the concept of like Beauty and the Beast, essentially, like the concept of this man who is ultimately a good man. And in the book, Jane Eyre, we are told explicitly via many things that you can hear me talk about in the show that he is a good man at heart and he has done good things and he takes care of the people that he is supposed to take care of. When a man like that has gone astray and is living his life in a way that we don't condone, which is true about Mr. Rochester. I mean, this is the thing. People are like, he's awful. It's like, yes, he is living, he's made bad choices. So he's living, when we meet him, he's living his life in a way that we do not condone. And neither does Jane Eyre. And so that's why we can like this. Like, we can like this connection because she doesn't go for him when she sees that he's doing things he's not supposed to do. So when a man like that latches onto the heroine as his savior, because not because she's going to come in and fix him all up and she's going to, you can change a man, but because he sees that she is so good and so wonderful that and he wants to be with her, that if he doesn't change into somebody who's worthy of her love, then he can't be with her. And so what an amazing thing to be loved like that. It's not like, oh, this man is so horrible, but if I just love him enough, he'll change. It's the opposite. It's like, what an amazing thing to be loved so much that you don't have to do anything at all. But he sees that in order to be worthy of you, he has to change. And that is what happens to Mr. Rochester. It doesn't happen at the moment when you might necessarily want it to happen, but it does eventually happen. And so that it's that feeling of like this, it's the Byronic hero. Some of us love the Byronic hero, me, but some of us don't. And if you don't, fine, you like Mr. Darcy. You're one or the other. I believe you're one or the other. Some people are both, and that's okay. But if you don't like Rochester, you probably like Darcy. And if you don't like Darcy, you probably like Rochester. So if you don't like Rochester, fine, you like Mr. Darcy. But it's the idea of this sort of tortured soul who who is pinning his salvation on you and then through no action of your own is saving himself. I mean, because of you. I don't know. To me,
Yeah.
that's all I need.
Well,
But, you know,
I think you do a fantastic job so if anyone wants to go listen to season 1 of Storytime for Grown-ups, Faith does a really wonderful job of just illustrating this throughout the novel. And I had never read the book before, so I didn't have any like preconceptions other than that my wife said I don't like Mr. Rochester. So
yeah.
um but I really think I want my sons to be Mr. Darcy. I want my daughters to marry Mr. Darcy, but I really liked Jane Eyre. Okay, and
There.
because of the thing you said where Jane doesn't bend her principles
Right.
and he has to make himself worthy, I think that is the key thing to me that makes it palatable and not just palatable early, but good as a whole. And so you know, if my sons do make bad choices and fall off the path, you know, I hope they do find someone that gives them that elevating hope and pulls them out, you know. So I say I want them to be Mr. Darcy because I kind of think Mr. Darcy is he's flawed, but it's not very.
Yeah, no, he is flawed. He's really flawed, but he's not as deeply flawed as
Right.
Mr. Rochester. And, you know, that's true. That's who he is. And I think, you know, I think you're right. Also, like I was saying with the Phantom of the Opera, like, yeah, you don't necessarily want to marry Mr. Rochester in real
Right.
life. You know, I mean, like you might have a kind of comparable situation in the sense that like a person might have had a rough life before meeting you and now they're okay and that's fine.
Yeah.
But like, you know, you're not gonna have, I don't want to spoil the book, but it's like I don't think you should marry a person who has done what Mr. Rochester
Right.
does. But
But the key
you
is
know,
worthiness now when you're going to get married, not what they've
yeah,
done. Right.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
So thank you
Fair.
for helping me to get a new book that I probably wouldn't have approached.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
So I have another one
Mhm.
about classic novels. There are several that I haven't even cracked the spine of because people have said, "Oh, it's an amazing," and there's other ones that I have, like A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens.
Mhm.
I thought was super slow for like the first three-fourths of it, but man, the ending was like the most amazing thing ever. And I think it wouldn't have been without the slow first three quarters.
Yes, right.
And so other ones though that I haven't gotten the gumption to do, like Moby Dick or whatever, I've heard several of these that are like people say, "Oh, it's slow, but you got to push through because the ending's really good." Um, how can we get, or is there just timing when we're ready for that, or is it like should we just push through even when we don't want to? Just like, are there, how can we tell if it's worth it before we get going on something like that? Because they
Yeah,
are of an investment.
yeah, they are. And I think that I don't know that you necessarily have to do that. I think, you know, like there are classics, there are lots and lots of classics that I haven't read. And the reason I haven't read them is either I haven't gotten to them yet, and then yay, I get to them, or it's because I took a look at them and I thought, I'm not gonna like this. And you know, it is, yeah, it's possible that if I sat with it and read it and got to the end, I might think like, oh, I'm glad I read that. But it's also possible that I wouldn't, because again, like I have different tastes than other
Right.
people. But I think you know, if someone is telling you like the end is great because it's super action packed or whatever, and you like that kind of thing, and you're willing to sit through three quarters of much slower, much more kind of, you know, ponderous text, then great. But I think especially if you are someone who's just starting out with the classics, you know, if you're sort of like, oh, I've never really tried any of these books because they all seem inaccessible to me, there's no reason to try to slog through something that you're not enjoying. That's a really good way to just teach your brain that you hate this stuff. And so I think, you know, I think it does have to do with what you're here for. You know, like I now, because I'm in the business of reading these books aloud to everybody, I now have to read more classics because eventually I'm going to run out of the classics on the show that I've read, right? So I have to read more. And so I might be like, well, I've read the first couple of chapters of this and it's not grabbing me, but it seems like the kind of thing that would be great or that I would like. Let me keep going and see what happens. You know, I'm reading one like that right now. I'm not going to say what it is in case I do it on the show. But I am reading one right now that I'm sort of like, why is everybody raving about this book? You know, I'm sort of like maybe a third of the way through, and I haven't gotten to anything that's making me think like, oh, okay, yeah, great. But I will keep going because, you know, I have a sort of professional interest in it. But I think if that's not true and you don't and you have other books on your shelf, like put it away and maybe later you'll be more in the mood, pick it up again, maybe not. I mean, I can probably guarantee you I will never read Moby Dick. I'll just never read it
All right.
because you know what I mean? Because I know that I'm not gonna like it. So sorry. And that's okay. And I think that the more you read classics that you come to love, the more other classics you will read. So you might be like, I'm never reading Moby Dick, and then you read a bunch of other things, and now you feel much more competent, and you're kind of like, well, now I'm interested. Then you might read it. Read it when you want to read it, not because you feel like you have to.
Yeah. And that goes along with that homework assignment thing. Like it's hard to like these books when you're forced to read them.
Exactly.
I to this day hate Huckleberry Finn, and I know everybody says it's amazing, but I don't know. I haven't given it a shot since high school. Maybe someday.
Yeah, no, I mean, you should. It is great, but it's awful because we all read it in high school, and and the things that our teachers want to talk about it are not the things that make it great. So then we get those stuck in our brains, and it's hard to read them.
Yeah. Um, so this might be a question. I don't know how much you'd read poetry. Are you a big fan of poetry?
I appreciate poetry in the sense that I want it to continue and survive, and I know
Okay.
that there are certain poems that I do love.
Uh,
I would not call myself like proficient in poetry. It doesn't speak to me the way that novels do, but I have a
yeah.
great respect for it, I guess is what
Well,
I would say.
I would probably say the same thing about myself. Um, I have, I guess, a question. I'll ask you anyway, and we'll
Okay,
see what you think.
great.
So I know, like, I really love a poem that has a story that you can, like, your dad once said that when he was reading I think he was in college and they were discussing Lord Tennyson's
Right.
poem, The Charge of the Light Brigade, and he
Right.
goes, "You could hear the horses'
Right. The
hooves."
horses, you can hear them. Yeah.
And I'm like, that poem is so good, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
so there are poems like that where you can hear the horse's hooves, you can
Right.
feel it, and it's there. And I love the story, and it's great. Robert Service has really fun poems like that. And so the ones that have a story and have a flow, occasionally ones that are more allegorical are good for me, but
Mhm.
there's other ones that are, I think it's funny because Rudyard Kipling's one of my favorite poets, but I think Spencer called him the best bad poet he knows.
Yeah.
Your brother, Spencer, sorry for the audience. Her brother is Spencer Clavin. Um, and I'm like, the best bad poet, like he's so good.
I love him. Yeah.
and uh and then they will quote people like T.S. Eliot, and I'm like, I have never read a T.S. Eliot poem that I could read a second time and be like, I'm just like, why?
Yeah. Well, Elliot is like famously elitist. He loves to hold you at a distance with all of his like things that are written in original Greek and stuff in the middle of
Yeah. I'm
poetry.
like,
Right.
I need four
He
different
loves that.
language dictionaries to get through a poem.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
So,
That yes. Wait, is the question like
oh,
what do
sorry.
you
I
feel
guess
about
the
that? No,
question
no, like
is, should we try to gain an appreciation for these poets that maybe purposely are trying to hold us at a distance? Or should we just say, you know what, I'm going to stick with the best bad poet I know, Rudyard Kipling?
yeah. I think the answer is that for each individual person, it's stick with whoever you like. For us as a culture, I think we do need to preserve the ones that have spoken to us down the ages. And Eliot is a good example of one of those, right? Like this, his poetry, it does speak to a time. It speaks to the time that he was in and the things, the issues that were kind of going on and the modernist movement and or postmodernist or whatever he was in, and all of these things. And I think to let those things just fall by the wayside and never read them again or never study them again is the wrong call. But I think, you know, each individual one of us is not the culture. And therefore, if that doesn't speak to you, again, like don't read it. I mean, I think, you know, poetry I think is a great place where like a teacher or a professor can help you. Like it does end up still feeling, it can still feel like homework if the professor's not great. But if the professor is great, I mean, I took a whole class where like, I mean, in college, I think we maybe a whole semester on the wasteland or something like that. I mean, we just, and it's not like it then became my favorite poem or anything like that, but but I had a good professor, and so she did kind of explain not only what is going on in the poem, like what does it say, because you need that, like you need notes along the way for the wasteland, but she also kind of explained what it's doing there, like why it's important, why it's a part of the culture, all of this stuff. And I think that's worth knowing. I don't think you need to task yourself with learning to love every poem that you don't understand. But I do think that we shouldn't be dismissive of it. I think we
Yeah.
should be like, yeah, okay. Like this is what I'm saying. Like I have a really healthy respect for poetry
Yeah.
when it's done well. I think poetry is one of those art forms that people think that they can just do because it just looks like a bunch of random words on the
Yeah.
page. And I don't have a healthy respect for that, but I do have a healthy respect for people who really are writing in the form and are doing what poetry is meant to do, which is to kind of encapsulate these ideas and images that speak to us. And so I think, we shouldn't dismiss it, but we also don't have to sit around reading it if it doesn't speak to us.
Yeah. And I'm, like I said, I love poetry. My dad is actually a cowboy poet. He's gone around doing shows and stuff for a long
That's
time.
cool.
And so he's, if you've heard of Baxter Black, that's basically my dad right there.
Yeah.
He gives those poems, goes around. And so I love the kind of story poem that are kind of that thing, the Charge of the Light Brigade, those
Right.
things. Others, I can hear a rhythm, and that's about all I can give
Right.
you.
Yeah. At least there's a
So,
rhythm. I mean,
yeah,
sometimes
right.
people are
Yeah.
not
No, when
even
there's not a rhythm, I'm like, oh gosh, this
right.
isn't poetry. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know. It's hard.
But I want to respect your time. I've really appreciated having you, but I do want to wrap up by asking you if there is some bit of wisdom that you have had recently from a book or a movie that you feel like has helped you in your life, if you can think of anything.
Oh gosh, like a specific thing from the
Sure.
book or just like
Uh, from any book or movie, whatever, like that you, or it doesn't have to be recently, I guess, maybe your favorite lesson from a novel or film,
no,
something that we
yeah.
can.
Let's go with so like I said, I'm reading Frankenstein right now. And I think it's full of, I mean, I would say that the sort of general takeaway is how similar humans are to one another across time. And that makes it really a lot easier to relate to people, right? Like I was saying before, if you read these books from a long time ago, but you're relating to their struggles, that's because these are the struggles that people have. And so, people are always today talking about how divided we are. And that's true in some way, but it's also not true in the sense that we all struggle with the same things. And in a lot of ways, we want the same things. And we might have different ideas about how to achieve those things. But in reality, you only have to read, a novel from, a couple hundred years ago to be like, oh, yeah, that's the same. I also am worried about finding a husband, or I also, want to, go out and seek greatness or whatever. And so, yeah, people have been people forever. And I think that's kind of a cool thing. And it can make you have a lot of compassion for people and a lot of curiosity about people that you might not otherwise have compassion or curiosity for. So that's one thing. And then I guess to Frankenstein, I think the way in which books can even be relevant to like specific things. Like Frankenstein is so relevant to what we're going through right now with like AI and various kind of technological advances that we can do, but maybe aren't great, or like we can use them for something good, but then we can also like take them even further and use them for something horrible and catastrophic. And I think like, she's writing this in 16, but here we are in 2025 having the exact same problem. So I think to be able to read these books and take wisdom from the past and apply it to now. So I think a specific thing is don't do that. Don't take technology too far because it will be really bad and it will destroy you. I think is the specific one.
Yeah. No, I love that. Thank you. And I have enjoyed all of the books that you've read that I had already read before. Even like Frankenstein, I read maybe 15 years ago or something.
Yeah.
And it has been really fun to listen to it with you and see a lot of things. I think it's fun to read things when you're younger and then come back to them with
Yes.
a little more perspective and life experience. And just the first time I was like, this is a fun book, you know, and that was kind of the extent. And sometimes I think with classic novels, especially, that's the level that you get first
Yeah.
is enjoy it and have fun. But like this time I'm seeing a lot of parenting lessons and I'm feeling a lot of like different thoughts about I'm trying to think of how to say this without spoiling things.
Hard, trust me.
uh who is good and who is bad,
Right,
and
exactly.
like what perspective are we looking at this from, and is that the right perspective?
Yeah.
um and some of those things like I wouldn't have even thought of the first time I read it, and you just assume that, oh, I saw a movie about this, I know who the good guys and the bad guys are.
Yeah,
Or,
exactly. Right. And you have no idea. And I think, yeah, I feel that way about Jane Eyre. I mean, because that's my favorite book, but coming back to it, as a wife or coming back to it as a mother, like the things that really speak to me and resonate with me have changed, over time. I used to think that one particular scene was like, oh, that's the one. And once I've gotten to that scene, whatever. But now I'm kind of like, no, actually, there's something else a little bit further than that actually, because I have gone a little bit further than that. And so I can sort of see that. So yeah, you come back to them when you're older at different times in your life. I mean, that's why these books are so great because they
yeah,
speak to you all the time, so you can
yeah,
keep
no, I
back.
think that's the same with me with scripture, with
Yeah,
these stories. Like the reason that they have lasted is because they teach you where you're at, which is I think the same thing Jesus did with parables, right?
exactly.
The parables are there, they're little stories, they're basically mini fairy tales, and they can teach us so many things. That's why we read them again and again, is because they have something for you today. And
Exactly.
that's, yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, So I want to give you a minute to promote your podcast, your novels. Let me just, how can people find you?
Thank you. That's very kind. Yeah. So you can find me on my website, which is faithkmoore.com. And then everything that I do is there. So there's a tab about the podcast. There's a tab, you can find out what my books are. You can find out about hiring me to edit your work. Although I will just say I am booked for a year. So if you think you have something you'd like me to edit in a year, let me know. But so that's faithkmoore.com. And then the podcast is called Storytime for Grownups. You can find it anywhere that you listen to podcasts. And then the two books are Saving Cinderella and Christmas Carol, and that's Carol with a K because it's her name.
All right. Thank you so much, Faith. It has been really a pleasure to chat with you and to get to know you a little bit better. And with that, I will say goodbye to the podcast people. We will talk to you again next week.